Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that can hear me but not see me, I am up on the third deck, taking advantage of an unusually nice day today. So we are backing out of Pier 55 here, and 55 has been the home of ARGOSY for quite a while now. It all started back in 1949, when Captain Link Campbell started the Spring Street water taxi, and he would take people from here in downtown Seattle at 55 all the way across the Puget Sound to the west to the Kitsap Peninsula. He was kind of a verbose fellow, liked to talk about what was going on the water and the waterfront as he was going along. And he noticed a rather peculiar trend. A lot of his customers wouldn't disembark the ferry right away. They would ride it back and forth a couple times, enjoying being on the water and listening to what he had to say. So he took the hint, and 2 years later, in 1951, he changed the name and nature of the company to Seattle Harbor Tours. And we've been doing laps around Elliott Bay and going to various other places ever since. It'll be 75 years this year. Now, like I said, we're just left Pier 55. On one side of that is Pier 54. The other side is Pier 56. Very nice, very orderly. That was not always the case here in the working waterfront of Seattle. Previous to World War II, all of these piers had different names, different letter designations, different strings of numbers attached. None of it made a lick of sense because there was no order to it. Military came in to use Seattle as an embarkation point. Decided that was not going to work for them because their soldiers and cargo had no idea which pier they were headed to. So they renamed, reordered, in some cases rebuilt a number of these piers, gave it the nice orderly number system that we have today. And we kept it after they left because it was a whole lot easier to figure out which pier you were going to. Also, as we're pulled away from the piers now, you can see that none of these are set up in a perpendicular fashion to the waterfront itself. They're all at this nice little angle. And that is because when this was a working waterfront, the ships would pull in, unload their cargo into these long warehouses, and that cargo had to go somewhere, and he usually got there by train. Now, trains do not make 90-degree turns very easily, so they angled the pier so the train could roll directly onto the pier, get loaded with the cargo, then back off the pier, and head out to wherever it was going. Now up ahead of us, off of the bow side there on the right-hand or starboard side of the vessel, we've got Pier 59, which is the Seattle Aquarium. That's a long dark green building, the light green trim, and the white frame window. The aquarium was started in 1977 as a research and education aquarium. The animals there are not trained. Most of them aren't kept for a very long amount of time. They're brought in as young adults, released back into the adult population a little while later. going by a seawall. Back behind the seawall is Bell Harbor Marina. It's basically day parking for boats here in Elliott Bay. The front side of the seawall is Seattle's very first large cruise ship terminal. It was finished in the year 2000, and it was built on kind of a hope and a prayer. Seattle didn't have any access or any piers that could handle any of the mega cruise ships that were being built at that point in time. So they decided to use this and create a large cruise ship terminal in the hopes they could lure some of the large cruise ships here and use it as a port. Turns out that was a very good bet. We have a very short cruising season, only April through October. In that short season, we will launch roughly 300 cruises from here up to Alaska. The vast majority of them go there. We get about 1.5 million people through the city in those 6 months. For a little bit of perspective. For a little bit of perspective, there are roughly 700 to 800,000 people that are regular residents here in the city. At the end of that pier, there is a tall or large gray building. It's got a mustard yellow bottom, some large red E's on top. That's the Edgewater Hotel. Now, the Edgewater was built in 1962, and it was built to help house some of the 9.5 to 10 million people that were coming in for the World's Fair that year. Now, the owners wanted to make a destination spot, so they decided to build a hotel on a pier out over the water. Turns out when you build something as complex as a hotel on a pier over the water, you can run into things like delays and cost overruns. So of the 9.5 million people that showed up for the 6-month-long World's Fair, the Edgewater housed exactly 0 of them as they opened 2 weeks after the fair closed. Now, in an effort to kind of recoup what they saw as losses, they came up with an interesting marketing strategy, which was to advertise in honeymoon and angling magazines as the only hotel where you can fish from your bed. When you checked in, they gave you a rod and a reel and a bucket. They put a bait and tackle shop in the lobby. This is all a wonderful marketing idea. It brought in people. They didn't need fish out the windows, but it is a horrible, horrible practice. Most fishing happens very early in the morning, and fish do not go gently into that good night. So as you were yarding, whatever you've caught from 1960s Elliott Bay, the 50 to 100 feet up from the bay to your windows, it's beating its poor little body against each and every sliding glass door below you, giving your neighbors a wake-up call they probably don't want. Also, just a bucket is not a huge amount of apparatus with which to clean a fish, so poor housekeeping had to deal with all kinds of messes that you probably don't want to think about. It only took 20 years for the entire practice to be deemed now worth it, and they stopped the practice in the 80s. But what really saved the Edgewater was a picture of 4 guys hanging out of one of those windows with fishing poles, and that was the Beatles on their very first North American tour. No other hotel wanted to take them. They didn't want to deal with full-blown Beatlemania. The Edgewater said they would, because the Beatles stayed there having the Edgewater our rock and roll hotel here in Seattle. Every band on their way through has wanted to stay at the Edgewater, as well as many, many of the bands. And that's actually what saved the Edgewater after their opening just a little bit late for their intended purpose. We're coming up on Pier 70 here, and parts of Pier 70 date back to its original construction in 1902 that makes certain parts of this pier the oldest existing parts of the original working waterfront here in Seattle. Now, as we pass Pier 70, this is going to be the closest we're going to get to the Space Needle today. It's a good time to get up and go ahead and take a picture if you so desire. Just be aware we are on a boat. It does move, rock back and forth, so be careful and steady yourself if you get up. We'll be able to see the needle almost the entire cruise, but this is the closest we're going to get to it. And back down here on the waterfront, there's that green hill with the 2 concrete walls running through it and the large orange sculpture on top. That is Olympic Sculpture Park.